When was the last time we talked? Maybe a year ago?
Yeah, I was just looking at it, and I think the date was sometime in 2014, but I don't know if that was a year and a half ago or what, but it's been a while.
So where are you right now?
Right now, I'm back in South Carolina. We actually just moved back in January.
Ah, interesting. How was your time abroad?
It was awesome. We were in Thailand and a few other countries in Southeast Asia from about July of 2015 through this past January. And then we were planning to be there for another 6 months to a year, but made a really last minute decision to come back and for her to go back to school. So we pretty much decided to come back and flew back like a week later, got an apartment and a car and all that. So it's been a bit of a crazy year so far.
That's great. I think when I spoke to you last, you were in Mexico, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
What have you been up to?
2 kids. It's been taking up most of my time. Work-wise, I think I did. Last time we spoke, was I doing private equity stuff?
I think last time we spoke, you were mainly doing the mineral.io stuff and then blogging at Drew Sanocki, but
yeah,
I'm not sure if you had done. If you mentioned private equity.
My brother still runs Mineral, but it's gotten away from paid and more towards email marketing, lifecycle marketing management. Mm-hmm. And I brought my consulting more and more into the private equity world. So working with these big funds that buy companies. And I ended up joining one as an operational partner. And what that means is I help them diligence deals and also grow their portfolio companies. So this one fund in particular bought a defunct retailer up in Boston called Karmaloop, which was like $100 million retailer a couple of years ago, went bankrupt. And I went in there. I'm the CMO now, and I am working with the CEO to grow the company out of bankruptcy, and which I think we've just accomplished as of like a month ago. I think started to grow them into profitability and
congrats.
Hopefully sell them again. So I do that. I'm always looking for things to buy too. I think that would be like the next. I keep working with the fund, going deal to deal, but I think I'd like to buy something myself.
Yeah. I listened to. I think I've listened to all of your nerd marketing episodes so far, and you've talked to me a bit about Karmaloop. So it's been. I was surprised at how open you could be sharing what you're doing with them.
I figure I'm a CMO, so I can do what I want.
That makes sense.
That I never really discussed it with the CEO. We had this understanding that I could continue blogging and doing whatever I want on the side. Mm-hmm. He doesn't care about any of this stuff. Yeah. It's and I kind of figure there's like a very low overlap between my audience and anybody who would care about streetwear, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, I thought it's cool how you're doing the podcast where you have the audio, but you also do screencasts. And I think,
I would love feedback would be great. I mean, as you know, I rebranded my blog and because I really wanted to talk more about customer analytics, retention, and I committed to the podcast because I wasn't able to crank out like epic posts, given my life. And
right.
So I just grab the mic and I go in a closet and I talk. I plan it out a little bit, but I'm always looking. I'm in episode 7 now. So any advice on how to make it better?
Well, I wanted to compliment you on how, I guess, engaging it is. I think it can be really challenging to have a monologue podcast that's actually interesting.
Yeah. I
know I did a couple of episodes just by myself, and looking back, I think I've actually taken them down because I'm so embarrassed by them.
Which I might do with episodes 1 to 10,
Well, I thought what you've done so far is really great. And I also like how they're pretty short. I think the first few at least are like, 5 minutes or 8 minutes or something.
Yeah, that's what I was shooting for,
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's to me that's a lot better than having like one episode that's an hour, even if it was the exact same information, because you finish an episode and it leaves you kind of hungry for more. So you click on the next one.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I thought those were really good.
Nice. Thanks.
Also, one of the things I wanted to talk about with you today is, I guess I was impressed with how data driven it is. And I know that's kind of what your focus is. And it just seems very like scientific. You have a control group with the testing you're doing, and I'm sure we'll get more into that later, but it's so different than a lot of podcasts and blogs, which are much more kind of abstract. And I feel like the strategies that you're using are very actionable. You can actually do these things and see instant results with your current traffic and sales. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what I wanted to get at with the blog, with the rebranding of it, and in the podcast, was that I'm a sucker for blogs that promise overnight riches and just like how I got 100,000 email subscribers in 24 hours, and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I ended up trying all those tactics, and like, yes, some of them are great, but some of them aren't. And, I think I keep falling back on the data to give me a little bit more context for a lot of the tactics. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, that's very cool. To kind of introduce you for any listeners who aren't familiar, Drew, you've been on the podcast before, and I just checked, and it's back in episode 45, which is only a few episodes ago. This will be probably episode 50 or 51, but I took a break of about a year and a half from the podcast. So it's actually been a long time ago. You started a multi-million-dollar e-commerce store and then sold it, and worked as a consultant for e-commerce businesses, and blogged at drewsanocki.com for a while, and did marketing for e-commerce businesses at mineral.io, and then have recently rebranded as nerdmarketing.com. Is that all correct so far?
That's all correct so far, yeah.
Cool.
Long and boring history. My life in e-commerce.
What would you say is, kind of in a nutshell, what's the main problem that people have that you're trying to address with your recent podcast episodes?
I think it's what I call tactical maneuver hell. And that's people get hung up on tactics, and I do too, because I read blogs or I go to conferences, and I end up with a notebook filled with hacks and tips and tricks and things I need to try that I'll promise to 100x my business in a week. And often you have no strategic context, so you don't know what to prioritize. You don't know where to start. You end up kind of overwhelmed. Maybe you've gotten lucky early on and your business is at a certain scale, but you're leaving money on the ground now because you haven't sort of done SEO right, or you haven't done email right. And so what I'm trying to do with Nerd Marketing is put a little more strategic context around all those tactics and talk about how you can think about growing a business, what I've seen work and what database marketers have seen work for a long time.
One of the examples you used in one of your recent episodes really, I thought, was a good concrete example, and it was of this guy who owns a gym. His name is Ron,
right?
And he has one arm, right?
Right. I don't know how he ended up with that. But yeah, there's the gym on the Upper West Side. Yeah, and that I think I was talking about Tripwire marketing.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into that whole example again. If people can go listen to Nerd Marketing to hear the full story of Ron and that whole example, but could you kind of give an overview of what Tripwire marketing is? Because when I first heard that term, when I think I saw it on your blog when I was checking it out, and I wasn't familiar with it, but after listening to the episodes, it's actually really, it makes a lot of sense. So could you give an overview of what that is?
Sure. It's, we all have limited funds, and aside from just funds, we have limited energy and limited hours in the day. So you can't do everything. You can't do all your 1,000 SEO hacks and conversion rate optimization hacks and email hacks, whatever. It becomes more, it's more advantageous to spend your marketing resources at the point of greatest impact. And usually that's when some customer deviates from standard behavior. And the example you're alluding to is a guy who owns a gym on the Upper West Side who the gym was empty basically. And he began just monitoring how often people come into his gym, setting tripwires for if they, that would alert him if they don't come in. And that's when he decided to spend his marketing dollars. So, a coffee shop would be a great example. The coffee shop doesn't need to market to the customer who comes in there every morning to buy their latte. Where they need to spend their marketing energy is trying to determine, like, okay, Drew hasn't shown up in a couple days. How can I pull him back to buy again?
So to recap, you basically want to figure out what kind of the standard or average behavior is for a customer or an email subscriber or whatever. And then when someone deviates from that, somehow detect that and then take some sort of action to pull them back into being a good customer.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. If you are listening and you have kids, you know that when the kids are yelling and screaming in the next room, you don't really have to worry about anything. You have to worry when things go quiet, and I think it's the same thing with customers. All your customers have standard behavior. There's usually an average behavior. They typically buy from you every week, every month, whatever. It depends on your business. But where you should be concerned is when that pattern deviates, usually when it starts to slow down or, the customers are beginning to defect.
Mm-hmm. So I've heard you talk about this on your podcast. So basically it's kind of typical behavior for a customer who buys from you to buy a few times and then basically their purchases get further and further apart as they kind of grow cold. Maybe they just are no longer excited by your brand or for whatever reason. And so how can someone, let's say someone purchases an average of once a month and then you don't hear from them for 2 months or they haven't bought from you in 2 months. What can you do at that point?
Well, you can send them an offer, and what you're alluding to is this thing called the customer lifecycle. And almost all retail businesses have a customer lifecycle. And that is, just like you said, customers tend to accelerate their engagement with a brand for a period of time and then decelerate, right? So it's not just retailers. It could be like a content company. I might get into reading a certain publication and devour it for several months and then become burned out on it and move on to something else. It's specific to your business and your market. If I'm talking about automobiles, the life cycle might be really long. If I look at how long and how often somebody buys a BMW. But if I'm looking at something like, a consumable, like a skincare product or toothpaste, it might be a much shorter life cycle. Mm-hmm. So the first thing you got to realize is that your customers exist and they have a life cycle and that you can model that out. If you look at your customer data, you'll find out that the average customer comes back in X number of days. And then the second thing you mentioned is, okay, well, what happened if they don't? What happens if it's been day 45 and usually they're there every 30 days? What do you do? And that's where things like email and remarketing come in. And what you want to do then is give them a promotion to come back to the site. Give them a reason to re-engage. I say promotion, but I'd use that in the broadest sense. Sometimes it can be like a discount promotion, but it can also be something like free shipping or a VIP phone number that they can call in or free gift with purchase. Any of these things are reasons to come back and engage with a brand.
And this kind of leads into something that you talked about on your podcast as well, which is, I believe, discount ladders, where, why don't you explain what that is?
Yeah, they're really related because it's a discount ladder is something where most retailers, most brands do promotions wrong. So if you open your inbox right now, your Gmail inbox or whatever, and search for some retailer you're getting email from, more likely than not, you're going to see a lot of promotions. You're going to see a lot of 10%, 20% off offers. And the issue with that is sort of the always on offer is that you train your customers to buy on promotion, and there's this hidden cost called a subsidy cost. And a subsidy cost is money you're paying away, margin dollars you're giving away when a customer would have bought it full retail price. Mm-hmm. And if you think about the life cycle again, when I first discover a new brand, and I talk about bonobos a lot because I wear their clothes. So when I first discovered bonobos, I was just enamored with the brand. They make men's clothes, by the way, but they fit me great, and I started ordering more and more and more. That's the absolute wrong time for bonobos to give me a promotion, to give me 10% off, because I've got my credit card out and I'm buying more and more, and I love the brand. That's a time when they should be showing me new products to buy, right? Or upsells and things like that. So getting back to the discount ladder, eventually I will burn out on bonobos. My wife will call BS because I wear it all the time. And, so I stop opening their emails, and maybe that's when I get the email from them that says, hey, Drew, 10% off offer in this email. And if I don't take the bait and more time goes by, what Bonobos wants to do is ladder that promotion. So 15% off offer. Maybe it's been 60 days now since I purchased, and at 90 days, maybe they send me the final 20% off offer. But that laddering up, that increasing of a promotion over time, increases the likelihood that I will go back and buy. And they save their promotion dollars, right? They give the lowest promotion first. If at any point in time I take the bait and I buy, then I'm out of that discount ladder sequence. I no longer see the subsequent offers, right? So that's in essence what a discount ladder is. And whenever you put on your email marketing hat and think about win-back campaigns, anti-defection campaigns, any campaigns that are designed to bring people back, I would always think in terms of laddering my promotions. And more retail, ESPs, email service providers, allow you to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've recently started using Klaviyo, however you pronounce it, as opposed to MailChimp, because I'm not aware that MailChimp can do things like that. Do you know if it can, or just...
It's harder. It's harder to, I think you can use their automation function to figure out the last purchase day, but it's really hard to automate it. Yeah, Klaviyo, Rejoiner, CartHook, these are all like the new breed of email service provider, and specifically made for e-commerce. So they pull in your transactional data, and you can go in there on day one. If you're starting from scratch and you run a retailer, I recommend what's called a 30, 60, 90 ladder. After 30 days, if the customer hasn't purchased again, send them a 10% off offer. After 60 days, send them a 15% off offer. And after 20 days, and after, what am I at? 30, 60, 90. And after 90 days, send them a 20% off offer. So that's a very easy promotion to set up in any of those email service providers.
In your experience, are those percentages pretty effective across the board, or does it vary depending on the product, the industry?
It totally varies. Yeah, I think that's a good starting point for most retailers. I see 30, 60, 90 is fairly common for online apparel and gift and major categories. But as far as the magnitude of promotion, it really depends on your own margin structure. There are certainly tons of retailers out there that don't want to promote at all or don't want to discount. So maybe then you've got to be a little more creative with what the hook is to bring the customer back.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned free shipping. Are there any other things that if someone doesn't want to offer a discount off the actual product price that they could offer as and how do you build up from that? Like what's the next level of a giveaway that you could have?
I see free gift with purchase, and that gift increases in value. I see a lot of free shipping offers. I think we mentioned that. Gift cards. They're just a number of creative ways you can kind of get around it.
Yeah,
if you don't want to use promotions.
Cool. It's really neat, and it's like it's pretty straightforward, and it makes a lot of sense. It's not like you have to be a big expert in anything to really understand how that works. But I'm surprised that it's not more common knowledge. And so I don't know. I thought it was neat how you're sharing that on your podcast.
I mean, this is part of what we talked about earlier with just strategic context, right? If you think the issue with e-commerce is that usually the customer acquisition cost is pretty high. It costs a lot to pull someone to your site to buy. And for most retailers, it costs so much so that the first transaction is rarely profitable. Maybe you break even on that. That if you hope to make profits, it happens on the second, third, fourth transaction, right? Mm-hmm. So the more you can just get in the habit of thinking of like, hey, my best new customers are my existing customers. The more I can mine that customer data and keep people from defecting, keep them buying from me over time, the better. The top way to do that's with email. Remarketing is probably number 2. But, I've got this guy on my list or this woman on my list. They bought from me in the past. They stopped buying from me. I need to re-engage them. And that's some of the more profitable work you can do as a marketer.
So if somebody wants to try this out and get started, how much time do you think it would take to set this up and try it out? Like, how much work is it going to be?
It's not much work. It's some mental work in terms of thinking through. I guess you could be lazy and just choose discounts, but think through the promotions. And if you've got some spreadsheet chops, you can kind of export your transactional data and see just how often people are buying. Mm-hmm. Or you can anecdotally ask your customer service team and you'll get an answer. Or you can just take the 30, 60, 90 thresholds that I mentioned. But it's probably a couple hours work in the afternoon. But the beauty of all those email service providers that we mentioned earlier is that this is sort of a one and done thing. You set up the rules now, and the campaign will just run going forward. And check it quarterly to tweak it or improve it or A/B test the offers. But that should be all you need.
I think on your last episode, you were talking about some of the numbers as far as how much ROI you saw on this type of effort. Can you, just so people understand like how beneficial this is, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, what the kind of campaign we're talking about here, which is to keep people buying longer, so to stop them from defecting. I mean, 500% ROI. It's incredible how profitable it is, and you calculate the ROI by figuring out how many dollars I'm giving away to run that promotion, and just versus how many more dollars I'm making in profit. And so it's just they're insanely profitable. If you Google around, you'll read that win back campaigns are great, and I agree that they're great, but that typically happens after a customer is already defected. In other words, you had a customer who bought from you in January, February, and then around the time of the holidays, you're going to go back to that person and try to get them to buy some holiday stuff. So that's called a win back campaign. But what I'm talking about is, before that customer stopped buying in February, you've already detected it's going to happen, and you keep him or her buying through March or mm-hmm. April. Like that is super effective.
Going back to what you said a minute ago about how customer acquisition is such a huge cost, and a lot of times the first purchase that a customer makes isn't profitable. Would you say that's probably often also the case for one of these situations where you're sending them a discount or some sort of free offer where it might their next sale may not actually make you any money, or you might just make a little or even go slightly under. But
yeah, you see that with a lot of retailers who do they've got the pop-up on their site, get 10% off your first purchase. And if they actually go back and run the numbers, you take that 10% cost plus the cost of the ads or whatever to drive that customer to your site. And that's why you find that, there goes your margin right there.
Yeah. So with like a win back campaign or something where the Tripwire, where they've gone 30 days or 60 days without buying, again, you might lose out on some of your margin with a discount code, but you're extending that life cycle longer to where hopefully they come back a few more times after that without a discount and continue that purchasing habit.
Totally. Yeah. I think it was Jay Abraham who said there are really only 3 ways to grow a business. And the first is to increase the frequency of purchase. So, given your set number of customers, get them to buy more than they've been buying. The second would be to increase the average order size. So again, set number of customers, just get that set number to increase its average order size. And the third would be to bring in more customers, right? So increase F, increase AOV, and increase total number of customers. And so what we're talking about here with the Tripwire campaign and the anti-defection campaign is really increasing the F. So that first one, just getting your customers to stick around and buy from you longer.
So I'm curious, because I haven't really seen anybody else talk about that sort of thing. Did you figure all this out on your own, or where did you learn this?
I wish I could take credit for it, but no. It's the ironic thing is this stuff has been around since the 50s. And it was like when I started my retailer in 2003, there was no blog, where I could read about online marketing hacks, right? It was just like basically Seth Godin and nobody else. Mm-hmm. And so I fell back on getting a lot of database marketing and catalog marketing books out of the library. And catalog marketing being around, since World War II, like they had a way of profiling customers. They had a customer file on every customer. And they scored customers according to 3 metrics: recency, so when was the last time that customer purchased; frequency, how many times that customer has purchased; and M, or monetary value, the total amount that customer has purchased. Mm-hmm. And using those 3 metrics, they were able to score all their customers. The purpose being they needed to figure out who to mail the catalog to because it was expensive. So there's just this whole body of knowledge about RFM and using things like recency, which is really what we're talking about here, to predict how likely someone is to remain a customer going forward. And, anti-defection campaigns and promotional usage. It's all there but you probably have to go to the library to read about this stuff. It's not as sexy as, get 100,000 Facebook likes in 24 hours using my cool hack that I write about. But
I mean, you can find all kinds of stuff on like how to do paid advertising and the latest Facebook ad trick and all this stuff, but not many people talk about the customer life cycle, at least that I've seen, and how to keep them around for a long time after you first get them as a customer.
Yeah, I think just that general concept of the life cycle though is gaining steam. I definitely read more about it now.
Okay.
That's one. I think that the other is just people are beginning to see what I think has been around forever. And it's just this 80-20 rule exists in your customers, that it's pretty common for 20% of your customers to drive 80% of your top line. So growing your business should be more of a question of like, how do I get more of those 20%? How do I acquire more of them, nurture more of them, merchandise products that they buy? It's got to be more about that. And that puts everything else into context. Yeah, you might have learned a cool new Facebook hack, but if your 20% is not on Facebook, or if you're not acquiring them through Facebook, then who cares? Like, you don't need to worry about that new Facebook hack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anything else, any other concepts that I haven't asked about that we should talk about?
Well, I think the 80-20 is a big one, and I've got a couple tutorials I'm going to roll out on my blog pretty soon about how to find your own 80-20 and what to do with that information. That's pretty big. I also think we're going to start talking about recency and frequency a lot more. I talked about RFM, so those 3 metrics are really important. Recency is probably one of the most important metrics, maybe even the single most important metric in predicting a good customer. So what that means is when was the last time someone engaged with you? It could be when was the last time somebody purchased. So, the woman who purchased from your site last week is probably going to be a better customer going forward than the woman who purchased from your site a year ago, right? The same thing holds for visits, by the way. If somebody was on your site last week, they are also more likely to be a good customer than somebody who was last on your site 2 years ago. Yeah. And I think there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with recency in terms of finding out which ad groups are performing better, which customers are going to be my best customers. Like, that's just one simple metric before you even get your first transaction on your site. You're going to be able to figure out who are more likely to be my best customers using recency.
Well, a lot of what we've talked about today, or I guess everything, is you've gone into it in a lot more detail in your own podcast over at nerdmarketing.com. And I noticed you have some free tools there, like a cheat sheet that people can download, sign up to your email list. And that's specifically on this whole Tripwire thing and how to set that up, basically.
Yeah, I I talk about this a lot, and I think I still get a fair amount of questions. So whenever I do a podcast now, I'm trying to pull together cheat sheets or that kind of summarize the idea, and maybe if it's relevant, like an Excel sheet or two. Mm-hmm. And now, like you and I talked about earlier, I'm starting to get into screencasts to actually show you how to implement some of this stuff on your own email service provider.
For listeners, go ahead and go to nerdmarketing.com and check it out, because I honestly think that Drew should be charging a lot of money for the information he's giving out for free. So go check it out.
Oh, you tell that to all your guests. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks. I plan to close it all off soon and charge just a complete. No, I won't. I won't do that.
I noticed on your site you have an Ecom Mastermind.
That is there to gauge interest, really. And I would love to pull together one in Q2. But, it's just if you go to that link on the site, you'll get a form. And really, I'm just trying to collect information on what people want. Mm-hmm. The idea being that this stuff is really powerful. And it's powerful it's not for everybody. I would not recommend, like, if you're a new e-commerce startup just trying to get traction, I wouldn't worry about retention. And retention is 90% of what I talk about. But if you're a 6 or 7 figure retailer and you want to get another 20% and you're not doing some of this stuff, like, it's a no-brainer. It's just like a layup. So that's who I think I'd like to work with. And I've tried everything from consulting to one-on-one coaching. And I think the group approach is pretty compelling, where we all have retailers of the same size and can do a lot of the analysis together and implement some of these campaigns together. So that's what I'm thinking with the Mastermind.
Yeah, that's neat. So I'm curious, if you don't mind sharing, is Nerd Marketing kind of a lead gen tool for your consulting, or is it more standalone and kind of separate?
I aspire to have some information products there.
Okay.
So, most of my consulting is done through this PE firm that I am associated with. So if we buy a company, I might take an operational role there, or I might help grow it. I do meet a fair amount of people along the way that I feel like I can add value to. Mm-hmm. If I can't, I would tell you. So some of those come through the blog, but I think I really am sort of chipping away. I've got a book in the back of my mind that I'm sort of chipping away and trying to find my voice on the blog. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Neat. Well, shifting gears a little bit, I always like to talk with people about kind of their daily work routines and, things that are working for them, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So
nothing's working. It's going to be a short segment.
Okay. I think I heard you mention once that you work at a co-working space. Is that right?
I do, which is pretty common here in New York. So they're all over the place.
Yeah, that's neat. There's a couple here in South Carolina where I am, not nearly as many as in some of the bigger cities, but it's great to get out of the house and work somewhere else, kind of keep those separate.
Yeah, in New York, we've got a 2-bedroom apartment. We've got 2 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment, so it's already tight. Yeah, and I can't work at home. I'd be killed by my kids, and the nanny's there, and she'd be up in my grill all day. So I had to get out. And right here in Times Square, there's like 5 within a couple of blocks. So I take the subway down in the morning. It's like a 10-minute commute, and I love it.
What kind of schedule do you have? I think you mentioned that you work with your kids a lot, like taking them to swimming practice and things like that. So do you work, like, once that's taken care of, do you work 40-hour week, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I would say it's roughly 40 hours. My kids are young; they're 3 and 1. So anybody who's been there knows it's I always aspire to do stuff on the weekends and at night, but it never gets done. I'll go home and I go home at 6, get the kids from the nanny, and they're in bed by 8, and then I'm just like exhausted. I crawl into bed. I might hang out with my wife for an hour. That's the single biggest hack for a new parent, I think, is go to bed early, because they're just at least one day a week. One kid will be up at 4:30, and if I don't get enough sleep, I'm a zombie. So going to bed early is key. And I get up and I'm hanging out with the kids and feeding them and bringing in, my son has swim class. I'll do that all before around 8 or 9, and then I get into the office. And so it's a 9 to 6 job.
Yeah. And is that almost entirely with Karma Loop projects, or do you have other things you're working on too, other than like nerd marketing?
Yeah, nerd marketing has been, it's a couple hours a week to bang out the podcast and to plan that. But, my day, quote unquote, day job is Karma Loop CMO. So that's, I would say 75% of my time is there. Was initially doing a lot of this lifecycle email stuff. And then it became a bit more of a management job and getting people in place to execute on it. And right now, it's just I've got things under control there to the point where I can experiment a little bit more and focus on the blog some more.
Neat. Is there a tool or a gadget or anything that you've been using recently that you'd recommend?
A tool or a gadget?
Yeah, whether it's like an online tool or a physical object or whatever.
I time track everything. I use Toggl, Toggl.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm like a big Pomodoro fan. It allows you to do Pomodoro and time tracking. So
cool.
If I don't do that, I can't get through my week. I mean, it's as a consultant, at the end of the day, I want to know where I'm spending my time and if there's a return there. And so I track everything: calls, sales calls, team calls, Karma Loop calls, whatever it is.
That's cool.
I think I mentioned I'm looking to buy a company too, ideally as something that will happen over the next year or two. And so that takes up some time and a lot of diligence calls there, which as of right now have zero return on them. But hopefully if I time track it, that doesn't get out of control. So I'm a big fan of Toggl.
That's neat. I use a Mac app called Tomighty, Tomighty, for Pomodoros, and I just got into that like a couple months ago, and it really helps.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it puts a little icon up in your toolbar on your computer, and runs the timer and runs the short break, the long break, and all that. For anyone who doesn't know what a Pomodoro is, basically it's a 25-minute period where you just focus, don't allow any distractions in, with a specific task that you want to accomplish during that time, and then take a 5-minute break and then do that. And I think the goal is to get around 8 Pomodoros a day or something like that, to where you're actually not working eight solid hours, but you're probably accomplishing more by taking those breaks to stay healthy and get up and move around, get your mind clear, get back to, and then be able to get back and focus and get a lot done.
Yeah, all the evidence shows you got to do those 25-minute sprints and then take a break, get away from your computer, and you'll be more effective.
Yeah, I've played around with different lengths. I've tried like 30 and 35 minutes. Have you tried that, or do you stick with 25?
I stick with 25.
Okay. All right. For me, it's probably better to do 25. But for me, sometimes I have a hard time. I feel like as soon as I hit the timer, then it's time to get up and take a break. And I don't know, but it is definitely super helpful to get up and take that 5-minute break to just allow your head to not be in a hole all day. Yeah,
it's just been, I think it's since I had kids, it totally changed my perspective on time management and need for time management. Like before, I kind of did it as a recreational activity. Oh, I'm kind of curious where I'm spending my time, but now it's a necessity. Just to get everything done in the limited time I have. Yeah,
and it's really interesting, and it's kind of motivational because you're not just clocking in at 9 and clocking out at 5 or whatever your hours you're working. It's more like you have a certain list of tasks you want to get done, and it's surprising how much you can get done in that 25 or 30 minutes if you're really focusing and not letting yourself get on social media or.
Right.
So it's more. I feel like it's more productivity based than time based,
right? Or
at least it helps you think that way.
Yep.
Yeah, and you might only work. If you do 8 Pomodoros, that's 4 hours or less than that, but you're probably accomplishing more than you would if you just sat down and worked for 8 or 10 hours straight.
Right.
Cool. Let me see here. Oh, do you have any book or blog or podcast recommendations people should check out?
They should check out the Nerd Marketing Podcast. Nerd Marketing.
Yeah. What's that?
Book recommendations. My wife makes fun of me for reading business books so much, so I'm trying to get off that habit. I'm reading a book about metabolism right now, which is probably like not any more exciting than a business book. Like, I'll teach you. You want me off the business books? I'm going to read about fat metabolism. So that's. I don't even know the name, or I'd recommend it.
Is that for like personal health or just for like just knowledge?
Yeah, personal health. Okay. And it's I find it interesting. It's basically a paleo book about how hunter-gatherer tribes have eaten in the past versus how we eat today. No, I think that might be it. I'm tapped out on business books. The last good one, I read the 80-20 Rule by Perry Marshall last, at the probably January. And that was really good in terms of helping me think. Everybody's heard the 80-20 Rule, but he just jams it home over 200 pages and shows you that even within your 20%, there's an 80-20. And even within that, there's an 80-20. So like it's more of a continuous graph, that you have these super, super profitable customers who would buy anything from you way over on the right-hand side of the graph. And not enough companies think in terms of that, in terms of managing their time or their marketing dollars.
Oh, that's neat. So it's like an exponential curve.
Yeah. Fractal.
Cool.
Right.
Fractal. Oh, yeah. Okay. Neat. Cool. Well, yeah, everybody go check out Nerd Marketing. And thanks for being on the show, Drew.
Sure thing, Leighton. Anytime.